welcome to the Red Kelly Cast. This episode is going to be a pre-recorded talk at an event hosted by the Communist Party of Australia, West Australian branch. This event was hosted around having a discussion about AUKUS, AUKUS being the military alliance between Australia, New Zealand, and the US. We'll definitely have a future episode dedicated to talking about this and the problems and contradictions within that. A big one especially being military spending, as well as tensions between Australia and China, and Australians' relationship with the imperialist American military as well. But going back to this episode, this talk is by trade unionist Jameson, member of the Maritime Union of Australia, and he gave a really good talk about, I guess, the MUA action in regards to AUKUS and the efforts towards protesting against the recent submarine deal that's been in the works. And what I really kind of took away from this talk is that often we look at unions as a means of, supporting workers, and absolutely that's their main function. But this talk kind of really shows that unions are a way of solidifying the workers' power to protest, because it's one thing to protest and demonstrate and have a presence, but it's another thing to protest and withhold your labor. Because at the end of the day, that's the bargaining chips, or that's the power that we as workers have, is our labor. So if we could withhold that, that's the most effective way we could put pressure on the current system. So with that being said, I'll hand it off to Ian.
I was going to speak a lot about many of the issues that Elizabeth has brought up and argued exceptionally well around the whole question of the irrational waste of money, public money, our money, on these submarines. And this is just involving AUKUS as well. Everyone associates AUKUS with the submarines, but there is a long-term project, and it's already going on, of involving the Australian military in the affairs of the American military. If you look at the Northern Territory at the moment, the amount of air bases that have been, massive air bases, which are going to be strike bases for the American B-52s or other bombers in case of a war with China. So we're getting more and more enmeshed into the whole US military apparatus. And of course, many of the other issues that Elizabeth has raised, I would absolutely agree with. It is going to cut into our social welfare. There is no doubt at all about that. You do not have $360 billion lying around in your back pocket saying, oh, we'll buy some submarines with that. It means where it's going to be cut out, as Elizabeth explained. Health, education, housing, social welfare. These are the things that are going to come up, if they're not bad already, will become worse as the years roll on, the decades roll on towards the fulfilment of the aims of AUKUS. There's many other issues that it's like a rabbit warren. You could follow down a particular issue with regard to AUKUS and how bad it is for us and how dangerous it is for the security and well-being and peace around the world. I want to take up a couple more issues. Many of the issues have been covered by Elizabeth already. Perhaps that can come up more in the discussion. But there are things that unionists have been involved in the past that I think are should be well taken into account when we look at what opposition can be generated against the whole AUKUS regime and the drive to war that has been prepared for us, particularly for our children in the next generation. One of the issues is nuclear power. Unions have had a very strong position, particularly the MUA in the past, and waterside workers against nuclear power. The Electrical Trade Union is another powerful union that has opposed nuclear power right from the very beginning. Not only the mining of uranium, but also its export and its transfer in Australia. So that is an issue that is going to be bubbling along in the background as this whole program of AUKUS is building up. There is, of course, the enormous ecological dangers that we're facing at the moment that the government seems to be doing nothing about except for a bit of greenwashing. $360 billion would go a long way to eliminate the carbon industry as it stands at the moment, and in order to transition to solar and wind power and even tidal power or other forms of energy that are safe for humankind, not carbon-based energy that the government and the opposition, but perhaps even more so, are very much hooked into. So it's very important that could become an issue in the future. We are looking at the moment around, when you look at most people about AUKUS, they really don't know its impact at the moment, and that's where we are. We're right at the beginning of this fight. Perhaps we're a little bit further than just the beginning, if you like. The formation of our group here, the Stop AUKUS Western Australia, and similar groups that exist around the country within the Labor Party, outside the Labor Party, are perhaps a sign, even in these early days, that opposition is there to the whole push for AUKUS. But I want to take up a little bit, one more issue that I should raise here is Indigenous rights. That was very much in the news with the referendum on the voice that has just taken place. People are worried, even despite the fact that the no vote went ahead, are worried about Indigenous issues and trying to bring Indigenous people to have some sort of rights and some sort of dignity to their lives. Not only is it the economic impact that it's going to have upon the Indigenous community with the throwing all these hundreds of billions of dollars into warfare, it is also a question of a basic question. What are they going to do with the nuclear waste? It's not going to go to America. America's not going to touch it. They're going to bury it on Indigenous land. And already the Indigenous communities around Australia have shown that they're opposing that quite vigorously. And so that could be another issue that comes up as we begin the fight around AUKUS. So there are quite a number of issues that we are keeping our eye on, if you like, that may begin to rally the bulk of the population around. And I'm very confident that on at least one of these issues, that there will be a lot more focus by the mass of the Australian population to the plans that have been worked out in secret and quite openly, if you like, about the drive to build up AUKUS. One of the things that I do want to comment on is the question of what can be done around AUKUS. As I said, we're at the beginning of the campaign to build the anti-AUKUS coalitions around Australia. Many will take up the issue of and by themselves and pushing their own particular approach to it, like the anti-nuclear forces that are around. But I think it's very important that we try and publicise it as much as possible, build the movement as big as possible, and of course that involves unions, and that's what I really want to finish up on. Australia has a very proud history of unions being involved in social issues. Of course, the Liberals are going to say, well, unions shouldn't be involved in anything political at all. They should get back to the grassroots of organising their workers, because they'll still try and smash us organising our workers anyway. But even within the Labor Party, unfortunately, there's an element of saying, well, you can't get involved in politics. But these people forget exactly where the Labor Party came from. Came from the unions, who knew that they had to get involved in politics in order to win many social issues back 100, 120, 130 years ago. And since that time, the Australian union movement has stepped up to the mark around questions of social issues. Numerous examples can be used, but I want to take up one issue, and that's the anti-war issue. Unions have been very involved at every stage of Australian history in the campaign against colonial exploitation, against military adventures overseas and so on. The anti-conscription referendum in the First World War, the two referendums that were held there that were both defeated, were defeated basically by the union movement, who even split their own party, the Labor Party, during the First World War, over the issue of conscription. And it was this conscription was never able to be introduced by Billy Hughes and the Conservative forces because of the union movement. Again, if you look at the whole history of getting involved in the pig iron bob, the question of sending pig iron to China in order to Japan in order to fight the Chinese people before the Second World War was a very big issue. In Port Kembla, and the Waterside Workers Federation took a very strong stand and eventually beat back the Menzies Conservative government at the time about sending steel to Japan in order to build fighters, build bombs to slaughter the Chinese people. So there's another example where the unions took a very strong stand and led the community behind them. After the Second World War, again, it was the Waterside Workers Federation and the Seamen's Union, two unions that formed the Maritime Union of Australia, who took a very proud role in building up and supporting the Indonesian independence movement against the Dutch, who thought that they could just march back in after Japan was defeated in the Second World War, march back into Indonesia. And it was again the solidarity that existed amongst unions then that led the community to support Indonesian independence, and the Indonesians have never forgotten that. During the Korean War, the same thing began to happen. The unions began to take a solid stand against war and for peace. I can remember back just vaguely, I'm that old, to the Vietnam War. A couple of years before I got involved in the big moratorium movements in Melbourne during the early 1970s, the Waterside Workers and Seafarers Union, Seamen's Union at the time, took on the question of not supplying the troops, our troops in Vietnam, which was a very, very important and radical step at that time, because it wasn't a big movement against the war in the 1960s. That was built in the 1970s. But again, it was the unions that showed the way forward there and said that we're not going to supply particularly the military goods to our troops in Vietnam. And that sparked a lot of public discussion and eventually led to helping to build the moratorium movement against the Vietnam War. I could go on, and there's many other aspects of it I can go on about. I was very proud to say that the Maritime Union here in Western Australia voted unanimously for an anti-AUKUS resolution and to support our comrades in Wollongong around marching against AUKUS. And I think that in the discussion that ensued from that when I moved the motion, I won't say I was. I was pretty confident the motion to get through, but I was very, very surprised that it was unanimous, and the depth of the feeling amongst rank and file workers, seafarers and waterside workers who wanted to get up on the callers and say that they're opposed to it because of this reason, they're opposed to it because of that reason. So there is a good grounding, I think, within the labour movement, within the union movement, for building upon those feelings already that people have an understanding of how things are actually working. But we do have a long way to go. One of the things that we hope to get out of tonight is to begin a discussion or continue a discussion about how to involve rank and file workers and union officials and unions in the campaign against AUKUS, and that's a particularly important component. That is not against building a general movement, if you like, but part of that general movement that I think is important. One final thing I'll finish on about the power of unions. It was particularly heartening to see just very recently when there was a threat of a strike in the oil and gas industry by 500 workers who just wanted decent conditions and good rosters and so on, threatened to take on Chevron. They'd already taken on Shell, it cost Shell $1 billion, but 500 workers here threatened, just indicated that they might go out on a protected industrial ballot, and the share prices in Europe for Chevron dropped 5%. Billions of dollars were wiped out overnight on the threat of workers going out on strike. So you can see the power that the unions ultimately have if the rank and file members are involved and unions are actively around that. And that's not, you say that, well, that's around bread and butter issues, but if the unions begin to see their power and their rights as workers and rights as members of the community to take issue with the government of the day around reactionary politics such as the AUKUS deal, then I think the government's something to really to fear. So I want to finish up on that note and thank everyone for coming. I hope there's going to be a good discussion later on where we can get to know each other a bit. Well, I'll get to know some of the people here that I haven't met before, and we can start talking about what we actually can do. I think that's the important thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.